Okay, let's get started with section 5.6. This is going to be factoring trinomials. So everything we're going to be doing in this section has three terms. It's a polynomial with three terms. Back to the beginning of the semester when we defined these terms. We are going to be factoring these with various degrees of difficulty, and we're going to use a method called trial and check or a guess and test. Okay, inspection is a fancier way of saying it, so we'll be using inspection today. And the point is that we have something that's been multiplied out, and it started out as two binomials. Okay. So earlier in this chapter we took two binomials and we multiplied them out using FOIL. Now we're going to break it down the other way using factoring. This is the f from the FOIL. It's the first thing times the first. So we have to think what will give us an x squared there. And that's usually pretty easy. It's x times x, okay? And this is the last. This is the L in FOIL. It's the last one times the last one, okay? And since everything here is positive, we know that both of the factors had to be positive. There's no need to have a negative, introducing a negative sign anywhere. Okay, so to get a 2, well, we don't have many choices. They started with a nice easy example. 2 times 1 is the only way to multiply and get a 2. So then we check, this is the O plus the I, the middle term. So the outside would give us a 1x, and the inside would give us a 2x. 2x plus 1x makes 3x. So we have this trinomial in factored form. Okay? Let's do another one. They get harder. Alright. Again, we have all positive signs. So we know the two binomial factors will both have positives. To get the x squared as the first term, the two first terms need to be an x times an x. Now, we need numbers that multiply to give us 8. And when we add for the O and the I in the middle, those numbers need to add up to 6. If I picked 1 times 8, that would give me an 8x and a 1x, which would be 9x in the middle. That's not going to work. Those are too large. So I must use the 2 times 4 option. It doesn't matter which one of those you list first. You can say 4 and then 2 if you'd rather. 2 times 4, and that gives me, in the middle term, a 4x plus a 2x, which makes a 6x in the middle. Okay? Very well. In part C, okay, and this is going to be a little bit different. We have a negative sign. When you have a trinomial that has a positive and a positive, then the factors are both going to be positives. When you have a trinomial that has a negative and a positive, like this one, it's a negative and then a positive, then the factors will both have to be negative, okay? Because the only way to get this positive at the end is if we have a negative number last times the other negative number last, making the positive number at the very end last, okay? So this, anytime it ends with a positive here, it's going to be the same, either positive or negatives, and here this tells us it has a negative for both of these negatives, okay? So we need an x times an x to give us the x squared, and we need two numbers to give us the 8, and it's going to be kind of like the one above, isn't it? We want the 2 and the 4 because that's going to add up in the middle, right? Because that, when we FOIL it out, we'll get a negative 4x and a negative 2x, which makes a negative 6x in the middle, and the last times the last, negative times negative is positive 8. So this is the way to factor that, okay? So anytime the last sign is a positive, the factors are either both positive or both negative, okay? Now let's move to part D. And part D says to factor x squared plus x minus 2. Okay, here's the other case. You might have a positive sign with a negative at the end, or a negative sign with a negative at the end. Either of these that have a negative at the end will have one factor that's positive and one factor that's negative. Okay? So if it ends in a negative, it has to have one factor of each. So I know that I'll have to have one factor that's positive and one factor that's negative. Okay, we put an x and an x to give us the x squared. Now we need the negative 2. And there are only 2 times 1 will give us that. So suppose we put 2 times 1. Okay, let's check and see if this works. On the outside I have a negative 2x, and on the inside I have a positive 1x, which gives me a minus x. Uh-oh, the middle term is a positive x. So we have these numbers in the wrong place. Let's try that again. Okay, I knew that I deliberately messed it up for you there. Okay, let's check this one and see if we have them in the right place now. We do. On the outside we get a minus x, and on the inside we get a positive 2x, which gives us a positive 1x in the middle. The first terms are right. The last term is a negative 2. This is in factored form. Okay? So you need to check that middle term, and the other terms you can pretty much get as you go if you're strategic about it. Okay? That would be 1D. Let's move on to 1E. We have many of these to factor today because they take a lot of practice until you get the hang of it. X squared minus x minus 2. Again, if the last sign is a negative, then that means my 2 factors will have one positive and a negative in them. Okay? We said that on the page before. Now, we need x squared at the beginning, and the middle term is negative here. So when I decide where to put the 2 times the 1, I want the bigger number to be negative. So I'm going to put the 2 here so that makes it negative. Okay, then I'm going to check this. X times x is x squared. Last times last is negative 2. The outside I get a negative 2. On the inside I get a 2x. I get a 1x. And that adds to a negative x. And it checked out. Okay? And part F now. Go ahead and factor x squared minus 3x minus 10. Okay, it ends in a negative. That means my factors will have one that's a positive and one that's a negative. To get the x squared, x times x. To get the 10, I need a 5 and a 3. Let's see if that's the right place for them. That would give us a 5x on the inside and a negative 3x. That makes a positive 2x. That's not it. Did I copy this correctly? Yes, but 5 times 3 isn't 10, is it? This needs to be a 2. Okay, so that should be a 2 there. That gives us 3x, a positive 3x, and we need a negative 3x. Okay, so we're going to try this again, and we're going to try putting the 2 with a positive and the 5 with a negative. Okay, now let's check this out. X times x is x squared. Negative 2 times 5 is 10. And on the outside I get a negative 5x. And on the inside a positive 2x. And that adds up to negative 3x. And that's what we had in the middle. This is the right factorization. Okay? And you'll get to where you're pretty good at guessing these without having to do all this checking stuff. But it never hurts. Okay? That's F. Moving on to G now. 1G. It says to take 2x squared plus 4x minus 48. I don't know if you remember from last section, but I said you should always check first for any common factors, greatest common factors. And I noticed, as I wrote this down, that there's a 2 that will divide everything. So my first step to do is to take out the greatest common factor of 2, and that gives me an x squared plus a 2x minus a 24. I divided everything by 2 because I divided the factor out to the front. Now, this 2 sits out front, and we ignore it as we factor the trinomial that's left. It has a negative at the end, so that means one of my signs will be a positive and one will be a negative. Now I need numbers that multiply to give me 24 and get a 2 in the middle. So I could use a 1 and a 24, a 2 and a 12, a 3 and an 8, a 4 and a 6, right? And since I need a 2 in the middle, and these have different signs, I want to pick factors that are 2 apart. Notice that the 6 and 4 are 2 apart, so those are the ones I want. And this middle number is a positive, So I want to place the larger number with the positive to make the middle work out. Okay? Since the middle was a positive and the difference was 2, I want the larger positive. Okay. This is completely factored form, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to check this middle part. X times x is x squared. We have a negative 4x on the outside and a positive 6x there. That makes 2x in the middle. Good. And last times last gives us a negative 24. Good. These get to be kind of fun once you get the hang of it. Okay, 3x squared minus 3x minus 18. Okay, I notice immediately there's a common factor of 3, which it's a lot easier to factor it out at the beginning. So let's take it out. Okay, and now I have to factor this. It ends in a negative. That tells me the sign of the factors are positive and negative. X times x to get the x squared, and I want either 1 times 6 or 2 times 3, and the difference is 1. So I want to pick the ones that are only 1 apart here. And I want a negative in the middle, so I want to put the larger of these numbers with the negative to give me a negative in the middle. Okay, so that gives me a negative 3x plus 2x is minus x. It checks. Good. Factored. Alright, let's look at I. I says x squared plus 15x plus 16. Okay. This will obviously have to be both positives, because it's all positive. X times x to give us x squared. Now to get 16, I can take 1 times 16. Those are 1 apart. That might work. 2 times 8. Or 4 times 4. Since these are positive, when I go to do my middle term, I'm going to be adding these numbers. 4 plus 4 is, if I put a 4 and a 4, that would give me an 8x in the middle. That's no good. Okay. Let's try the 1 and the 16. That would give me a 16x plus a 1x, a 17x in the middle. It has to be positive because they're both positive. That doesn't do it. Let's try the x plus 3, x plus 8. And that would give us 8 plus 3 is 11. And we need a 15. Okay, folks, there are numbers that do not factor. Think of 13. Does that factor? No. What do we call numbers that don't factor? We call them prime. This is a prime polynomial. It doesn't factor over the real numbers. Very well. Don't be afraid if you get 1 on the test. I'll try not to give you a lot of these because they can make you nervous, but there's nothing wrong with a factoring, one that doesn't factor, okay? 1j. And it says x squared y squared minus 6xy squared plus 8y squared. Oh, they're making them ugly now. Well, the first thing I noticed, they all have a y squared. So I'm going to take out the common y squared. And that leaves the x squared minus the 6x plus the 8. Oh, and that looks a lot better. So just let the y squared sit out front. It's already factored. And if it ends in a positive, then these two signs must be the same. In this case, they have to be negative to get that negative there. Negative times negative will give us a positive at the end. X times x. Now I want numbers that are going to add up to 6. So I either have to use 1 and 8, and that's not going to work because it either adds up to 9 or 7. That won't help us. And a 2 times a 4. 2 plus 4 is 6. That looks good. So 4 and 2. Since they're both negative, it doesn't matter which one I put where. So let's check this. X squared, positive 8 at the end, negative 2x and negative 4x makes a negative 6x in the middle. We've got it. Okay. Feel free to FOIL those out if it's helpful to you if you need to do that. Better than getting it wrong. X to the 5th plus 4x to the 4th minus 5x cubed. Check for that common factor, and the lowest power of x we can take out is x to the 3rd, which gives us an x squared plus a 4x minus a 5 when we pull that common x cubed out. Now we leave the x cubed out front, and we need to factor this into two binomials. It ends in a negative. That's our clue that we have a positive and a negative factor. X and x. Okay, we want 5 is just 5 times 1. And we want the middle term to be positive, so we want to put the 5 over here with a positive to keep the middle one positive. Okay, there we go. We've completed number 1, lots of factoring of trinomials, 3 terms, into 2 binomials. And sometimes the greatest common factor out front. Okay, number 2. It says continue to factor. We're doing everything with the trial and error method, so we can kind of ignore their instructions today. 4y squared plus 12y plus 9. This is a special one. You don't need to worry about knowing that it's a special trinomial because it's going to give you the right answer if you just think about it. These are all positives, so my factors must both be positives. To get y squared, I'll need a y and a y. But I'm leaving room in the front because I have to get the 4. As many times as possible, just try the equal factors 2 and 2. It could be 1 times 4, or it could be 2 times 2, but more often than not, it's the 2 times 2. And let's do the same thing with the 9. Let's try a 3 times a 3. Okay? Now let's check if this is going to work. It's going to have 4y squared in the front, 9 at the end. Then in the middle we'll have a 6y, and in here we'll have a 6y, which gives us a 12y. We got it, okay? So the equal factors often work. This is a perfect square. It's 2y plus 3 quantity squared. And I recognized it as such because that's a square, and the middle term is double their product of the square roots. So that's something some of you may become able to recognize. But if you can't, just inspect it. Okay. No common factors here. 8 will go in. Nope. No, nothing will go into this. And this is not a perfect square. Nothing squared, well, the square root of 8, but this is not a perfect square. This is a perfect square, 3 times 3, so I don't know. We'll just have to look at this a while, I guess. It ends in a positive, so the signs will be the same. Because of this negative, they'll both be negatives. And again, we'll try the equal factors. Why not? For the 9, 3 times 3. We're inspecting and guessing, so. And for the 8, we have a choice. We can take 1 times 8 or 2 times 4. I don't know. Let's try 1x and 8x. We'll see if it works. I don't know. Okay, so that's going to give us the first thing and the last thing, correct? So let's try the outside. We get a negative 3x, and on the inside we get a negative, that's 24. I think this is 27x. That's not it, folks. Okay, that's the way it is with trial and error. Sometimes you have to try more than once. And you will find when you do it yourself, that happens more often than you like. Okay. Now I'm going to try putting the 2x and the 4x, because 2 times 4 will give me the 8, 3 times 3 will give me the 9, and I've already gone over why they both have to be negative. So let's check the middle term. That's a negative 6x on the outside, the O and the I is a negative 12x. That adds up to negative 18x. That's what I needed. This is it. We factored it. Okay? And don't feel frustrated if it takes you more than one attempt. It just sometimes does. Okay, where in the heck am I? Let's see. Part 2C. 2C, is it? Yes. 6x squared plus 5x minus 6. And again, now, if you're getting the hang of this, pause the lectures and try these on your own, and then watch the lecture to see if you get it correct. Okay, no common factors to pull out. It ends in a negative, so I have a negative and a positive. to get the 6x, try the factors that are closest in size. Since these numbers are all kind of small, if these numbers were bigger, I would use 1 and 6, but they're not. I'm going to try 6x and 3x. So to get 6, I'm going to have a 6 times a 1 or a 2 times a 3. And I think I'm going to try the closer factors because these numbers are closely, they're closely grouped, okay? And I want the middle term to be positive. So if I put the 3, we'll just try it, 3 and 2. We'll see what happens, okay? So on the outside, I'm going to get a 6x, and on the inside, I'm going to get a minus 6x. That gives me no x's in the middle. That isn't it. Okay, so let's try again. Let's try 2x minus 3 and 3x plus 2. Don't go switching everything at once. So I left the first numbers in the right place that they were in, and I went ahead and broke this up, moved the numbers places here. I had a negative 2, now I made it a positive 2. I had the positive 3, now I made it a negative 3. Okay, let's check the outside. We get a 4x, and the inside minus 9x. So that gives me a negative 5x. Ooh, I'm so close. I've got the right number, but the wrong sign. Okay, so that didn't work. But I'm going to use it because it was so close. Seems to me like what I should do now is leave everything in the place that it's in, but change this to a positive and that to a negative. Switch the signs because I was off by my sign. Okay, everything else was okay. Let's check that middle term. Negative 4x and positive 9x gives me 5x. Yaha! We got it. Okay. And I'm trying to show you how I'm thinking through these because on inspection it requires thinking and some guessing and testing. Okay, that was 2c. And now we will look at 2d. 10x squared minus 7x minus, oh sorry, I copied on the wrong line. 7x squared minus 31x minus 20. I didn't even get close, did I? Okay. Looks good. Now here I've got a little bit larger number. 7, I like that because it only factors one way. Okay. I have a negative at the end. So that means I'm going to have a positive sign and a negative sign. And let's try 7x and x. I'm looking at this number and I'm thinking 20. 20 would break down to 5 times 4. Heck, why don't I try something, see what happens. 5 times 4. 5 times 4 is 20. Okay, so let's see what the outside gives us. Negative 28 and a positive 5. Negative 23. Well, that didn't do it. I need a bigger product. I'm going to try switching the 5 and the 4. See, I need a 31 in the middle instead of a 23, so I'm going to put the 5 over here so that it gets multiplied by the 7, see? And I can make it bigger. Okay, that's my strategy. I'm going to leave a 7x and an x in place, and I'm going to put the sign's the same, but I'm going to put the 5 over here this time. See how I do. That way I have these two together, gives me negative 35. And these gives me a positive 4x. These give me positive 4x, sorry there. With the English majors in here who are listening to my subject-verb agreement. Hey, hey, we got it, folks. Okay. And again, unless there's some really huge number, don't try radically big factors. Get the ones that are kind of close together. We had the choice of 1 and 20, 2 and 10, and 4 and 5 here, and I used the ones that were closest together when I started my guessing. Okay, that was 2D. And let's look at E. 2e. Causing an avalanche over here. Okay, 2e is 6x squared plus 27x minus 15. Any common factors? Will 3 go into everything? Hey, 3 will go everything. Won't it? Take out the 3. Divide a 3 out of all the terms in the trinomial. Okay, so now I'll leave that 3 stuck out front and ignore it as I work. I need a negative at the end, so I'm going to have negative, but this is a 2x. Oh, we haven't had this before. So to get a 2x, I'm going to have an x times a 2x, right? That'll give me a 2x squared. I have to have one of each sign. Okay, let's try a 5 times a 1. See how we do. I hope I get it the right first time. I'll be lucky if I do. I often have beginner's luck, though, so we'll see. Though I am not a beginner at factoring, by the way. That's a 1x. And this is a negative 10x, which gives me a negative 9x. Golly, I'm close, right? The trouble is that the negative's in the wrong place, right? That should be a negative 9, should be a positive 9, right? I'm off by the sign. So I'm going to leave everything in the position it's in. Only the sign is messed up, right? The positions are good, but the signs need to be the opposite way. Let's see if that fixed it. Okay, that's going to give me a negative x on the O, and the inside would be a positive 10x, and that gives me a 9x. Yippee, that's it. Okay, if you have the right thing except for the sign, then leave everything in place except switch your signs. Okay, that's E. Let's look at F. 2F is 6x to the second y to the second minus 7x y to the second minus 20 y to the second. I sure said y to the second a lot. I know that I have that in common. But no numbers. Okay, so I'm going to take the y to the second out. That leaves a 6x squared minus a 7x minus a 20. So I factored out the greatest common factor. And now I'm going to do the old inspection guessing. Okay, 2 negatives. That means I have to have a positive and a negative. Nothing here is very large, so when I choose my factors, instead of 1 and 6, I'm going to use the 2x and the 3x. 2x times 3x will give me 6x squared. Now, for 20, I have 1 and 20, 2 and 10, or 4 and 5. Again, these are not real large numbers, so I'm going to stick with the 4 and the 5. Okay? Let's try that. Just threw them in there in no particular order, folks. On the outside, that gives me a negative 10x. On the inside, it gives me a 12x, and that's not it. Okay, we didn't get it. So I'm going to leave everything in place except I'm going to switch the 4 and the 5's place to see what happens. I'm going to try plus 5, and 3x minus 4. Okay, so on the outside I get a negative 8x, and on the inside I get a 15x. Hey, the difference to those is positive 7. And so that means this is the right answer, except instead of a 7 being positive, the 7 needs to be negative. So I leave everything in the right place that it's in. The numbers stay in place, and the variables, and the sign is wrong. So that shouldn't be a negative, it should be a positive. It shouldn't be a positive, it should be a negative. Okay, that's going to give me a positive 8x and a negative 15x, which is going to be a negative 7x. That's it, folks. We got it. So I hope this is helping you to see how I reason through these. And it's unreasonable for you to expect that you're going to get every one of these on your first try. It's not going to happen, okay? So, be patient. This is 2G. It says to use another method, but we are only using this method. So we proceed right on through the problems with the same stuff. You are welcome to use another method if you have learned another method. Or if you want to go to the tutoring center and tell them, this method's not working, I want to learn other methods, they will help you. Or you can read in the book. They have examples, and they also have video lectures in your My Math Lab that you could watch if you would like to do that. Many ways to learn. And remember the tutoring center, which is in Wallace 342. It's free, and you should take advantage of that if you need to. Alright, I'm going to inspect this. There are no common factors that divide everything, so I have to just do the guess method. I will need a positive and a negative since the last sign is a negative. And again, I tend to guess the factors that are close. So instead of 1 and 10, I'm going to try 2 and 5. 2x and 5x. And again, I just put them in, see if it works. Instead of 1 and 33, I'm going to use 3 and 11. Those are the only other factors, the ways to multiply 33. And since this is going to get multiplied by a 5, I'm going to put the smaller one here, okay? And the larger one over here. Because if it multiplies by 5 and I put 11 there, I'm going to get 55, and that's just way too much, okay? So I'm going to multiply these two, and I get a negative 22x on the outside and a positive 15x on the inside. I'll be darned, I got it, okay? Negative 7x is exactly what we needed. Got it on the first try. That doesn't often happen, okay? But sometimes you get lucky. Okay, and then we have letter H, and they would like us now to factor 20x squared plus 23x plus 6. I like it that everything has positives, so both of the factors are positive. Notice that 23 is a prime number, so there's no common factor to be removed. Again, I picked the factors that are close together. I'm going to try the 4x and the 5x. To give me 20. My choices, of course, were 1 and 20, 2 and 10, or 4 and 5 to multiply to give me the 20 in the front. I picked close together ones. To get the 6, I'm also going to choose the 2 times the 3, the close together ones, because these numbers are not that big. And since this has a 5, I think I'm going to place the smaller number right here so that when I multiply the I for FOIL, it will have the smaller number there. So that's what I'm going to try first, and we'll see if it happens. On the outside I get a 12x, and on the inside I get a 10x, and that gives me 22x. Oh, it didn't happen, did it? Okay, well, don't go changing everything at once. The first thing I'm going to do is try switching the place of these, okay? You could often that'll fix it out. So let's try that. 4x plus the 3 and 5x plus the 2. So I just switched the place of those two. Alright, so on the outside I'll be getting an 8x, and then this will be a 15x, and that adds to, 23x. We got what we needed in the middle. First is right, last is right, middle is right. This is my factored answer. Good. So going pretty well. And now we're ready for letter I. This is still on number 2. 3x squared minus 8x minus 11. The good news is we're doing this all in one long video here. Okay. My signs. Since it ends in a negative, I have to have a positive and a negative. And to get the 3x, I'm going to need a 3x and an x to give me 3x squared, or 1x. 1 times 3 is 3. Now to get 11, I need a 1 times an 11. If I place the 11 here, when I do the FOIL, it's going to multiply by the 3, and that's going to make it too big. So I'm going to place my 11 here, so it gets multiplied just by the 1x, and I'll put the 1 over here. So let's try this and see what happens. So on the outside, I get 3x, and on the inside I get, it's a negative 3, right? And on the inside I get 11x. That gives me 8x. Okay, we had the right number, but the wrong sign. So we mark that gently out, and we write the same thing but we switch the sign. Okay? And then we're going to check it. On the outside, I get a 3x. And on the inside, negative 11x, which gives me a negative 8x, which is what I needed. There we go. We got it factored. Okay? Today I have a lot of them that I have almost right, but I have to switch the sign. Okay? Let's do number 3, more factoring. They ask us to use the substitution method. We don't really need to do this. We're going to go straight into factoring. Okay. Notice that this is an x squared. What they would like you to do is just change x squared to something else, like u is equal to x squared, and it's just not necessary. We can look at this and figure it out. Now, to get an x squared and in the middle and an x to the 4th here, we need to break this down to an x squared times an x squared. Because x squared times x squared will give us x to the 4th, and then that middle term, when we go doing the outers and the inners, will be an x squared. Okay? Now, to get a 6, we either need a 2 times a 3 or a 1 times a 5. The signs here have to be opposite. 1 times a 6. 1 times a 6 is 6, right? I think we need to use the 1 and 6. In fact, I know we do. And the middle term is negative, so I'm going to put the 6 here so the bigger number is negative. Okay, let's check this. First times first is x to the 4th. Last times last is negative 6. On the outside, I get a negative 6x squared, and on the inside, a 1x squared, which makes a negative 5x squared, and that's what I needed, and we got it. First try. B. Okay. 9 x to the 6th plus 6 x to the 3rd minus 8. Notice there are only a few of these. These are the hardest type problem. Most of the questions you'll be getting are like the earlier ones where it's just a simpler exponent, okay? Now, these are ending in a negative, so I'll have to have a positive and a negative in my factors. If I want an x cubed in the middle, then I'm going to need x cubed and x cubed. X cubed times x cubed, you add their powers, gives you x to the 6th. But to get that 9 out there, again, use the equal size factor. Stick a 3 and a 3. I think I'm going to rewrite this. 3x cubed plus 3x cubed minus. Okay? I didn't want to wedge that 3 in there. Now, to get an 8, we can choose between 1 times 8, 2 times 4. And again, we'll pick the ones that are closer together. The middle term is a positive. So I want the positive to be with a larger one of those factors. I'm going to put the 4 there and the 2 there. That's my reason. Now let's multiply. On the outside we get a negative 6x cubed. On the inside we get a positive 12x cubed. We got it. First try. 6x cubed. That's what we needed. So you can multiply this out, but we have correctly factored this by inspection. Okay, and one more question. One more practice problem. 3C, and then you'll need to take off and do your My Math Lab. A plus 4 squared and 7 times a plus 4 plus 12. Ugh. This one we really might want to do substitution. Why not just stay what we've been doing, okay? Alright. We need a little bigger space here. These are both positives, so my signs will need to be positives. Now, to get this middle term as an a plus 4, I'm going to need to put an a plus 4 right here and multiply it by another a plus 4. Because a plus 4 times a plus 4 will give me a plus 4 squared. And then the middle term will turn out with an a plus 4. Now, I want the factors of 12. I could pick 1 and 12, 2 and 6, or 3 and 4. These are all positive, and I want factors that can give me a 7. So obviously I want to pick the 3 and the 4 because they'll add up to 7. So let's try a 3 and a 4. So let's check. First times first is a plus 4 to the 2nd. Good. Last times last, 3 times 4 is 12. Now let's check the middle. When I multiply these two, I'm going to get a 4, a plus 4. When I multiply these two, I'm going to get a 3a plus 4, which that gives me 7 of these lovely a plus 4s, right? That's what we needed. So this is the answer in factored form. Now let me see if they've written it like this or if they've gone ahead and simplified it. They did simplify it. So let's take this first parentheses and say that's a plus 4 plus 3 is 7. And this next one, a plus 4 is 8. So they're going to write it in simplified form, a plus 7 times a plus 8. Okay, that concludes section 5.6 on factoring trinomials. Please do your My Math Lab homework before you continue with the lectures.